Hi, I'm Bill Hallman from Rutgers University, and I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about communicating about COVID-19 in an era of virally disseminated nonsense. I want to start with the idea that much of what we need to talk about with respect to coronavirus is invisible, and not just the virus itself, but in fact how it's spread and how we will contain it. So part of our goal is to try to make the invisible visible for people. Part of the problem, though, is we live in an era of virally disseminated nonsense, and that as human beings, we tend to look for new information that's consistent with what we already believe and with our identities. We also tend to reject information that's inconsistent with our beliefs and identities, and we often resent people who try to give us information to correct our misperceptions. So we often have a vivid and negative emotional response to people who are fact-checking us. We know that motivated reasoning and social media is amplified by social media, both through the algorithms used to deliver targeted information to us, and the fact that social media filters information through our friends, and that we are typically only connected to a small number of like-minded others on social media. So we tend to only see a thin slice of information and opinion if we get all of our news and information through social media. One problem, of course, is that when we get misinformation, that lies only have to be plausible to be accepted. Here is a campaign by WHO and CDC to try to counter the myth that drinking alcohol will somehow prevent you from being infected by the COVID-19 virus. Of course, it sounds plausible that if you consume alcohol, it will somehow sterilize your digestive tract and keep you from getting the virus, but unfortunately that is not true. Perhaps my favorite myth of the COVID-19 era is Panera Karen claiming that masks won't stop the virus since pants can't contain farts. So if you can smell a fart through your pants, what makes you think that a cloth mask is going to actually stop a coronavirus particle? It sounds right, so therefore it must be right. Unfortunately, it is wrong. So part of the key here is to focus on plausibility. You can't fact check every lie, so you need to focus on your battles. You need to pick your battles, focusing on the plausibility of the lie and frankly, the potential influence of the liar. So who's telling the lie and how likely is it to spread? It's also important to understand that mental models matter. We did work for the Centers for Disease Control where we asked people to tell us how the immune system works. And over, people gave us the military metaphor. That is, there are the good guys in your bloodstream, the good guy white blood cells who fight the invading germs, who are the bad guy army. And when they win, you are essentially cured. So this is the dominant mental model that many people have about the immune system. After we asked people how the immune system works and they gave us the military metaphor, we then asked, how does vaccination work? And consistent with the military metaphor, we heard over and over things like, it adds extra troops to your germ fighters, or it's like the cavalry riding in. The problem is, while that's consistent with the military metaphor, that's not at all how vaccination works. The problem, of course, is that if you have the military metaphor, it's really difficult to try to explain, to take the time to explain to people how killer T cells work. So it makes much more sense to work with the metaphor that they've already got. And so one way to do that would be, for example, to say that vaccines help your germ fighters recognize the enemy and respond to them more quickly with the weapons they need. That is consistent with what people already believe and doesn't require you to give them a heavy dose of science. It's also useful to understand that there are various kinds of nonsense, various kinds of misinformation, starting with misinformation itself, which is information that's inaccurate by accident. It's presented initially as true, but later shown to be false. That's different than disinformation, which is intentionally inaccurate and being spread deliberately to mislead people. That's slightly different than malinformation, which is information that's accurate, but being deliberately spread to inflict harm. And those three are slightly different than propaganda, which is misleading information that's used to promote a particular point of view, often based on an appeal to emotion, not necessarily on fact. There are other kinds of nonsense, including rumors, hoaxes, and gossip. The key is that is to understand the goal of the misinformation itself, and to understand that much of the nonsense that's out there is not meant to inform, but to actually inflame people's emotions. So there's no guarantee that correcting this information, giving corrected facts, is actually going to do anything about that emotion. It's not going to put out that flame. So we need to be careful to listen to the underlying concerns and values expressed by that misinformation, and to know that simply correcting information doesn't necessarily address the underlying concerns. So the big question for you is, what values are being expressed by the misinformation? Here's a great example. This is a woman who's saying it's not about a mask, it's about control. She may very well understand the science of the efficacy of masks, understand social distancing, but for her it's not about that. It's about being in control herself and not being told what to do. So finally, I want to leave you with connecting with shared values is way more effective than using facts to convince people they are wrong in trying to get people to take action. So I'm very much looking forward to what you come up with. If I can be helpful, this is where you can find me. Be well and do great things. Thanks.